Okay.
Hello and welcome to our session today. The session will be hosted by the Special Interest Group for Social Simulation and Games. And I'm very happy that we have, let's say, two awesome speakers, because I will also be a speaker. And yeah, so I don't want to prize myself. I think we are ready to go. So we have 4 sessions planned today. The first talk will be by Liu Yang today from the Southeast University of China. I will give the second talk. I'm from the UAT in Norway. And the third part of our panel today will be an interactive session that will be guided by Melania and Harko Verhagen. And our last talk will be by Christophe Lepage. And very much looking forward to the day. And without further ado, we will start with the first presentation. One more remark: if you're interested in joining our special interest group, please register to our formula that you can access from the Social Simulation Week program. And I will send out an invitation to everyone after this workshop. Okay, Liu, please continue.
Okay, thanks, Timo. And I will first try to share my screen. Let's see. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see your screen. It's not. Yeah.
Okay, so now it works. And please just interrupt me if I get stuck at some point. And thanks for Timo and Harko for having me here. And it's my honor to present our work. I'm Liu Yang I'm a research fellow at Southeast University in China. And today I would like to share our research on integrating agent-based modeling, series gaming for transport and urban spaces design. Yeah, and first I would like to introduce a little bit about our previous work. So the initial work was presented in the Social Simulation Conference 2018. And then we built upon the research, and this year we published a work on Urban Design International. And these are my co-authors and my collaborators. Kun Van Dam from Imperial College London, Lu Feng Zhang from University of Chinese Academy of Science, and Andreas Philippopoulos Mihalopoulos from University of Westminster, and Emil Champagne from Delft, TU Delft. And a short background and literature about our research. So firstly, the motivation of doing this research is that we start from an urban design issue, a realistic urban issue that there is more and more awareness that we need to build integrated transport and public space systems. And now here we build an acronym for this system. We call it TIP system. So in order to achieve this kind of integrated systems, we find that co-design is a powerful tool in order to achieve this kind of participatory urban design. So we find a lot of tools to achieve co-design. And it's different from participatory design. Co-design is more, a pattern that it has equal cooperation between citizens, and the experts use focused plans to stimulate non-experts and in order to transform their ideas and to achieve collective knowledge to build an interactive design. Some powerful tools for co-design, we find that visualization is a useful tool, and agent-based model for supporting co-design process is also highlighted. But there are some challenges for agent-based models. Firstly is the validation issue, that many researchers are using empirical data through observation and surveys to validate agent-based models. Another challenge is to get qualitative data for generating realistic agent behavior rules, and also how to describe an accurate environment for the agents to move around is also a challenge. And serious gaming comes here. It is a tool for gathering qualitative data. Firstly, I want to illustrate the games. Games can motivate people for fun because they are fun, and games can be used as a tool for communication or instruction. So a serious gaming, which is usually designed by a predefined purpose formulated by the designer, it is more useful for offering an understanding of possible behavior in the real world. And here I find a useful literature. These authors, they compared different uses of games, from pure games to games for research, for education purposes, and games as interventions. In our research, the games are mostly used for research and educational purposes. So we use serious games to collect information, to collect data, and do research. We also use them to educate and train our participants. So the research aims in this study, we have these three aims. Firstly, to develop a co-design methodology for building an integrated tips system, and then to create a computer model to engage the public and to support project analysis and appraise different urban design scenarios. Finally, we want to design a series of serious games to collect comments and expectations from the residents in order to know that what kind of problems are they wanting to be addressed. And also we want to use these games to gain insights in user behavior, and that could be included in the simulation model in order to make it more realistic. We use some literatures, especially some theories in social science, to build the games. Firstly, we introduced the lawscape. I will not go into details about these theories, but you can easily find them in our paper. And we also use the theories of cognitive map and needs theory, surveys and interviews. These methods and theories were used in designing the series of games in our research. And visualization is a powerful tool to engage the public because it is a common tool that either experts and non-experts can use it and can easily get information from them. So we use a visualization to aid our agent-based model to engage the public. Then I want to go into deeper about our methodology. So in this research, we would try to combine different elements, different methods actually. Firstly is gaming. In this research, games represents serious games. And then agent-based models, then we want to use them to support the urban design process. So this is the set of flows. And firstly, you can see from the arrows, firstly, we find that games can collect qualitative data for giving insights to agent-based models. These kind of data include such as how do the users recognize their environment, and how do they interact with their environment, and also we can get the data of behavior rules, and also the humans there, how do they follow a set of rules. And also this data will include such as the users, their cognition of the environment. In this case, we can build a more realistic environment in the agent-based model. And the second flow shows that using games, we can also collect a series of collective knowledge. This may include we can collect the users, the residents' needs and their wants about a specific setting in the urban area. And after these, we can see from this flow 3 and 4, we can use the agent-based model to do system analysis in order to support urban design. And we also use agent-based model to evaluate a set of metrics to predict different design scenarios. And after we create a series of designs, we can also use these designs to contribute to agent-based model. And after this, we will develop a prototype agent-based model. And this prototype agent-based models, aided by visualization tools such as animations, can be used to engage the public and to inspire them, to stimulate discussions and to get them involved by using videos and animations such as that. The final step would be step 6. We haven't done this in this research, in this case study actually, but we think that it will be more interactive if we can show different design scenarios to these participants. So in that case, we can get them more informed about different urban design scenarios, what will be in the future what will the urban space looks like. And then we just find, it looks like a banana. So I created it, I just gave a name of banana model to this conceptual model. Based on this conceptual model, we want, this figure shows more details about how did we combine urban design. These flows shows the flow of urban design and urban modeling. How do they support each other? I will not go into detail about this one. And this figure shows that the orange blocks are the flows in urban design process, which are mainly dominated by design experts. And the green blocks shows the flow, the processes of urban modeling, which, but as you can see, games in our research, that games can be introduced in an early stage, no matter in urban design or in urban modeling. So we can use this qualitative data in urban design in the very beginning. And go one step further, how did we conceive these series games? The blue blocks are the different steps in the game. And the upper flow shows how did we ask participants to do for each step. And as we are designers and also we are observers, what did we analyze after each step? And the first step in serious gaming, we ask them to explore the landscape. After that, we analyze the correlation between environment and behavior. And the second step, we ask them to draw their cognitive maps in order to analyze the correlation between human cognition and environment. And after these two steps, we show a prototype agent-based model animation to the public and did an interview at the same time. And we use this to revealing a hidden layer to the public. After this broad overview, we then ask these participants, actually they are residents here, we ask them to write down their needs and wants about the space. And then we ask them to do a co-design. And after gaining gaining their expectations, their collective knowledge, we then designed a set of integrated transfer spaces plans. And we use agent-based model to evaluate these plans. Then we do redesign and selected a set of scenarios. This is the framework of the prototype agent-based model we used in this work. I I will not go into detail because we presented this a couple of times already. So I will just drop this. And a case study in London Hackney Week. I also presented this in 2018. So as you can see, this research is a part of the crowd control project. And in this research, we are a team of multidisciplinary background experts, and we did a 1 month research here. This is the site of the case study area, and this is a larger scale. For the first step in our serious gaming, we asked 2 groups of people, 50 local residents, divided them into small groups. And we asked them to firstly search and document the signs of the symbolic landscape. These are, for example, road signs, such as stop. And we asked them to hyper comply with them and then to upload to the social media platforms, and then we collect data. The second step is to ask them to search and document signs of the material landscape, such as a fence, and then we ask them to resist these demands. And the third step is to ask them to occupy space and explore the possibilities of create a spatial justice. And this step tends to let them explore the atmospheric landscape. And this is one of the figures showing one of the participants is resisting the material landscape. And then some results. Human behaviors are instructed, restricted, and directed by the transport public spaces systems through the designs of signs, roads, etc. And human behaviors also have impacts on this system, that individuals may not use public space in the way inscribed by the designers. That is an interesting result. And the second step, we ask them to draw cognitive maps. And as you can see, the canal in the site and the bridges over it form a fundamental structure of people's image of this area. And accessible bridges and the boats on the water could also be public spaces. These are some findings from our research. And some people tend to take transport infrastructure and urban spaces as a holistic system. And the next step is that we let them watch a agent-based simulation and did some interviews in parallel. One of our interviewees said that I never thought about people's movement in this area. Every Londoners live their own lives and even does not know their neighbors. The computer model shows me a hidden Hackney Wick. And the final step in the serious gaming is to ask them to map their needs, and we ask them to write down their needs on stickers and paste them on the map. So these are some initial data we get, qualitative data. There are 3 types of needs. Firstly, open public spaces. They want diverse types of open spaces. Secondly, they want canal side paths be broadened and equipped with more street furniture and be more accessible. Thirdly, they want more public amenities. So in conclusion, the riverside areas are the most attractive part of the site that are expected to be more accessible, diverse, and safe. So, and the railway line and the station should be more transparent and safe. This final step is a co-design process. We ask them to draw their designs. After this research, we did an online survey, and these are some feedbacks from the participants. And as a design expert, we then go back to my office and do some focused designs. As you can see in this first plan, we increase the accessibility of the canal side roads and lanes. And we, on the left-hand side is the baseline scenario, and the right-hand side is the integrated plan 1. And we increased the connected node ratio, and also we added more open spaces along the canal. And these are simulation results. As you can see in the plan 1, it is not, the canal side spaces didn't attract more people, so we redrafted our design. We created a plan B or plan 2. In this plan, we added more, increased the connectivity of the railway canal side lanes, and also we created an integrated public space system along the canal. And then we can see that the canal side spaces attract more people here. And the final step, we visualize the use of different urban spaces after the build upon the results of our simulation. And each clockwise shows that how many people use this space during a whole day. Some conclusions. The series games, especially the cognitive maps, reveals how those on the ground see these locations, distance, and barriers, and tells us that the location assignment algorithm should be improved. And the games also signifies a gap that details in the infrastructure should be improved. And yeah, and another remark is that the social simulation model demonstrated to the participants proved to be an effective way to engage and inspire the public. And simulation results indicate that increasing the street connectivity and providing more public spaces alone can hardly attract people to walk or to attend recreational activities. And these are some results. So I would like to introduce a Chinese proverb. There is a saying that I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. In our current research, want to go a step further to explore how could we use the natural motivation to play a game for the purposes of improving learning. So we are continuing our work to see the educational purposes of serious gaming. And finally, I want to say thanks to the project and Heather, Julius, and Dr. Wander Yaher for giving us insightful comments to improve the paper. And thank you very much. And Timo, hello.
Thank you very much for your talk. That was very, very exciting.
Can I, how many minutes do I still have?
You still have time for asking a few questions if you like to, and get some feedback from the audience.
Okay. Actually, I prepared an interactive session here. I want to, this is a online pooling platform, and I will send this link to the chat, and I hope that, and there are 3 questions there. I want to know, because most of the audiences are game designers or agent-based modelers. I want to collect your qualitative data also. How do you think about the use of games for agent-based models? So I will just copy this, and you can ask questions in parallel.
Can I ask then?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Thanks for the presentation.
Thank
thanks.
you.
Okay, thanks this time. And I have a question, because from what you explained was you use the agent-based model more for visualization of the like, it's not that you integrated the game. The game is not affecting the results or the parameters of the IBM. or how is that you integrated those like the results of your observations into your ABM?
We firstly use them. Can I start the pooling at first, and then we can do it?
Yeah, maybe you share your screen so we can all see the polling.
Okay. Yeah. And firstly, thanks for your question. And share my screen. This one. Yeah. Can you click into the link?
Yes, the link works. I'm already answering your question. So the first question is, what can social simulation models contribute to serious gaming?
Yeah, that's, and yeah, it will be a word cloud. So you may need to write down some words separately. May not be a sentence.
Okay, so it's only single words that we put in, yeah? And we can put
only
up
single
to
words.
20. Okay.
Yeah, it's and I want to answer the question. Actually, I need to do multiple tasks in the meantime. Yeah, your question is about how did we use agent-based model for how did we use serious games for the agent-based model? Is that right?
Yes, because what I saw was that you only showed them the ABM, so I was not sure how was the relation of the people with the ABM.
Yeah, we show them, and then we collect the data of how did they recognize, how did they recognize the environment. So then we change the physical settings in the agent-based model. So that is the main part in our research. Because if I share this screen again, let's see this slide. In our ABM, we have an environment setting, and so in this, after collected a set of data about how did they recognize their environment, how did they so in their mind, how do they feel their environment? Then we change the road network layer and the land use layers and make it more realistic. That is one of the inputs from the games.
So
yeah, please.
Sorry if I can. You use the cognitive maps, like the drawings that they developed, and then translate that information into the
we use the cognitive maps and also their needs mapping results. Needs mapping, and also the cognitive maps, needs, and the results from the escaping landscape. So it's not a quantitative analysis, I would like to say. It's not a direct analysis or synthetic of the results. It's more, the process is more or less subjective. And now I would like to close the first question and go to the next one. Thanks for participating.
Yeah. So we have about like 2 more minutes, and then we need to transition to the next one.
Yeah. And we can keep in touch if you have further questions or you have some suggestions for our work. Yeah, we can keep on. Okay.
So if there are there any more questions that you want to raise? Like from the audience, sorry. If not, I would start a little break. Then we have time to answer the poll from Liu, and then we will start with the second talk. So we come back in about 3 minutes.
Okay.
Fill out the survey, but we need to continue to keep track. So the second presentation is by me. I will now start to share my screen, and I hope you're ready. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you very much. Okay. I want to give you a presentation on a research that I'm conducting together with nine other researchers from various different backgrounds and also affiliations. And we came together in a workshop in Manchester about 9 months ago when we were discussing the application of games and ABM, how we can mix games, and what we actually expect from the combination of these two methods. We noticed we're researching for about 9 months, and I think it's about time to give birth to our paper. I will present you today some preliminary results from our research and the methods that we actually use for our systematic literature review. So when we were discussing our interest 9 months ago, we had a diverse group, especially senior and junior researchers, and we figured out that there's a lack of a comprehensive overview. So a paper that you can actually look into if you're interested in applying games and ABM, you look into it, you have an overview of the field, what's going on. So that's especially hindering for young researchers. So if you want to enter to the field, you don't really find a point where to connect. So our goal was to examine the existing approaches to mixing games and ABM and actually reflect on the good practices and solution to overcome these challenges when you try to apply both methods. And we figured out when looking at that even when talking about individual terms, there's a problem. So we have a lot of papers and there's not even a conclusive understanding of what, for example, a game is. So our method that we were using is a systematic literature review. That means we first collected a selection of articles. We started first just with our team knowledge. So we came together and discussed articles that we were interested in, that we knew already. And then we kind of filled out the gaps by an online search and online databases. We used Scopus and Science Direct, where we did a keyword analysis, where we searched full texts of publications for our search terms that were games, agent-based modeling, and various combinations of that. We then, from that article selection, started the data collection, where we did first full text coding. That means we looked into the text of the article and went through the qualitative text, and we collected a data set of bibliographic data. With these data sets that we created, we hope to, or we are actually at the moment running 2 types of analysis, a qualitative analysis and a quantitative analysis. Our goal is to have a paper. We already handed in an abstract of the paper at the International Journal for Social Research Methodologies, and we hope to have it out in the beginning of next year. So what do we have? What's our data set? The article selection, what we have is we did an initial screening. In our team knowledge, we found 17 articles that described the application of games and ABM. And in our Scopus and Science Direct review, we added another 300 papers. For our review, we were only interested in a specific set of data. So we wanted to exclude papers that did not were not proper research papers and that did not talk about a proper mixed methods approach that uses game and agent-based models. That also means that ideas that were described that did not that only explained one of the methods were also excluded. Also ideas without any application. So we were not interested in papers that only wrote about the possibilities, but we wanted to analyze papers that described the proper research with a case. So with a research that was rolled out to analyze something, applying games and agent-based modeling. After all these excluding criteria and screening the articles, we remained with a data set of 52 papers. So our data set concludes papers from 2001 to 2020. And you can see that in the beginning, mixing games and ABM wasn't that popular. We only found a few papers, while over the time, especially now in recent years, we find more and more papers. Let's go to the results of, or some results of our qualitative analysis, which was a full text coding of 52 papers. Yeah, that was kind of challenging, but we did something. So for our text coding, we described 40 codes that described the entire study, only the game, the ABM, and the corresponding between game and ABM. From our codes, we then can conclude conclusions about the purpose, topic, research, design, for example, the pros, cons, and future applications of the researches. So, why do people mix games and ABM? Games provide a platform for stakeholders to discuss and agree on solutions for a problem. So it's a very, it's a method that keeps people. It's a very inclusive method that helps people to work with stakeholders. The ABM, on the other hand, helps us to develop what-if scenarios from our games to reproduce gaming sessions in silico with different parameters and attributes, for example. Games are also used to develop ABMs, to understand the heterogeneous behaviors and interactions of actors, to develop plausible, context-specific models and algorithms for agent-based models. Games are also used to validate agent-based models. For example, to compare the behavior of players with that of agents, or to test the ontology of a model. So does my model cover all the important attributes of a phenomenon? When we analyze the research design, we, as I said before, we looked at mixed methods, a mixed method approach. So where games and ABMs were employed to answer research question. We figured out that on the one hand, research that combines games and ABM is a mixed method approach. So we have a game that is combined with an agent-based model. We have an agent-based model that is combined with a game, as we also heard from Leo just before. And we have more complex research designs. These kind of methods are mostly used for community-based scientific approaches, for example, to facilitate dialogues. Usually, or in the beginning, these methods were mostly labeled as companion modeling. On the other hand, we have research designs that intertwine games and ABM way more. So we have games and ABM hybrids. The game is basically the ABM. human players and autonomous agents are mixed together to cooperate in finding a solution to a problem. So people sit actually on a computer and interact with it. These more recent developments are labeled as agent-based participatory simulation or hybrid composite simulations. We'll probably hear something about that later on. Okay, that were some primary results from the qualitative analysis. I want to also show you some of the quantitative analysis where we looked deeper into bibliographic information. Okay, when analyzing the structure of authorships, we figured out that there are almost no lone wolves in our field. So this mostly comes from the complexity of the approach. So there's nobody who's actually an expert into games and an expert into agent-based modeling. So people need to come together. But mostly dominant are small collaborations. So as we can see, about 70% of the papers in our dataset were published by 4 or more authors, less authors. Okay, let's look at the publication timeline. I designed a little video of the authors and their clusters, and that they published the articles. When you look on the top left side of the video, you will see it shows you the timeline, and you will see here clusters of authors popping up. These clusters are highlighted in different colors. I will now start the video. Okay, so what does this cluster by authors tell us? We can do we see my mouse? I hope you can see my mouse. I'm pointing to things now.
No, we cannot see your mouse, I think.
Oh, okay.
Now we can see.
You can see? Okay.
Yes, we can see.
So as you can see, we have several clusters here. 2 of the dominant clusters I now tell the French cluster and the American cluster, or the US American cluster over here. And we can see that these clusters have different publishing strategies. So I will go into that now. As you can see, so the French cluster represented by the little blue dot over here, and the American cluster represented by the green bubble on the left side. When you look at the graph, you can see the number of scholars in a cluster on the y-axis, and on the x-axis the how many articles they actually publish together in one cluster. The size of the sphere tells you the level of collaboration, so how many people were actually publishing together. And this is very interesting. So the most 2 dominant clusters, the American one and the French one, had different publishing strategies. While we have in the French cluster more small teams of authors that published many, many papers, like in our starter set, 11 papers. In the American clusters that represented a huge bunch of our links that we analyzed, we see that they only published 2 papers, but they had almost 19 co-authors in the papers. When considering the origin of the affiliation in this cluster, so we can see that almost all clusters are international. Here again, we look at the French cluster and the American cluster. or let's look at another cluster. We can see that, for example, the Finland cluster was collaborating with India, while the French cluster is oftentimes collaborating with Thailand. US cluster is oftentimes collaborating with Brazil, while the Brazilian cluster is collaborating with Costa Rica. So this means most likely that there's a case study somewhere, so that we have a researcher team, a national researcher team that goes into an international collaboration to work in a case somewhere else. And what's also interesting is that we don't only see this international cooperations in the big clusters, but we also see it in the small clusters, where there's almost always an international cooperation present. This kind of is also underlined by the type of organization the authors come from. So we can see that universities most of the time collaborate with non-university entities, for example, like research companies or governmental institutions, hospital, and so on. Also here, we can see that these cooperations between international university and non-university actors are present in the big clusters and in the small ones. Which also picks up a little bit like one of the theses why people actually use games in their research when applying ABM. So it's a very empowering approach. So it's facilitating cooperation and co-ownership of actual stakeholders. Okay, this is how far I want to go today. If you have questions, now is the time to raise them. I'm very happy to also talk about details about how we conducted the qualitative and quantitative research parts. And there are also some other co-authors here in the audience, so maybe they want also to contribute if they want to. Thank you.
May I ask a question concerning understanding one of your
Yes, please.
I didn't got where you had the graphic with the number of co-authors on the one axis and the number of papers on the other axis. You said that the number of co-authors, I didn't understand why the green US circle was bigger and compared to the smaller, because French one, because it had more co-authors and more, I just didn't grasp that.
Yeah, because there were more collaborations between the authors that were involved in the articles.
What does more collaboration?
Maybe, okay, maybe Patricia can say something about that. 1 second. Yes.
Can't hear you, Patricia.
You're muted.
Damn it! Yes, I'm so sorry. So Timo, can you please put on the slide, and I'll try to explain that. So the size of the bubble actually denotes the number of edges within the cluster. So you can see that because the American cluster, the green bubble, has only 2 papers, but there were 19 people in it. Both publications had 19 people. Therefore, there were, for every co-author, there was a link to another co-author. Therefore, altogether, they comprise almost 50% of all of the links between authors, all of the co-authorships. Whereas in the French cluster, you have 11 papers with altogether 28 authors, but those 11 papers You usually have 2 authors, 3 authors. So the graph wasn't a full graph with full possible connection. So they only account for a fourth of all of the connections between co-authors. So it's about how dense the edges are.
Okay, now I got it. Thanks.
Yeah. So yeah, you see, I think you can see it here that in the American cluster, in the green cluster, everyone is connected to everyone. And in the French cluster, you know, a paper has 3 authors, another paper has 5 authors, another paper has maybe 6 authors.
May I ask a question regarding your review paper? So what's the time span of your search from 2001 to, yeah, I just wondering, during the pandemic, I was thinking there may be less and less collaborations for game design or for implementing games. So I just wonder if you search more publications in the recent months, there may be some interesting results. I don't know. Just
so yeah, so we conducted the research beginning of the year. It might be that there are more publications now, but yeah, so that's our, like, the frame that we looked in. There were also way more papers. As I said before, we had 317 papers in our initial data set. But the thing is, when you actually go into the details and you read about the papers, you can see that oftentimes they don't really intertwine the games and the ABM part. So they use, for one part of the study, they, for example, use a game, and for another part of the study, they use an ABM. So the research question is not really answered by applying both. And that's also something that we figured out about the, when you look into the research design, people more or less describe what, so when they're justifying the research design they choose, they more or less describe what they want to do and not why they actually use that, for example, sequencing of methods. Yeah.
And if I could also add to that, because I think that's very important. So for the searches that we used, we didn't have any limits on dates. So we used all of the available results. We did not limit by publication year, but it turns out that the empirical studies with a mixed method approach only started appearing in 2001.
Okay, thanks for adding that. Very interesting, Rita.
Is this still done?
The first paper that we actually found was, I think, from the 90s. So, but we had to exclude it because it didn't match our inclusion criteria. Yeah, Wanda, please. Thank you. Nanda, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Yeah, and thank you for the very nice and clear presentation. And it's very cool how you have I mean, as a team have advanced. I just have a question. What are you now doing next? Because it makes me curious about, have they different conceptualizations of what they consider a game? And so I presume that you want to use this review to bring some clarity about the concepts, what it is and how it can be used. So could you elaborate a bit on that, or is it secret?
It's still kind of a little bit, I can talk a little bit about it. Let's say it that way. So our goal was, or we hoped, that we can find very clear descriptions of specific approaches and write guidelines how to employ them and where to look if you want to find good practice examples. We now figured out that the field is very, very spread out. The applications are very, very diverse, and there's not like a common vocabulary. Also, there's not too much collaboration between actually the game research world and the ABM research world. So if there's a very ABM-centered paper, they mostly write about the ABM while not putting too much effort in the description of the ABM game mechanics, for example. So now we kind of more searched or try to really build these clusters, as you could see, to actually identify where are the strains that we look into. Yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Hello, hi Timo. I also have a question, and it's also related to the future. And I was wondering, so this literature review was to look for methods that combine together games and ABM, which in the current situation with the pandemic crisis can be very interesting, because I was wondering, there was a study or multiple studies that tried to combine these methods and doing this research remotely, so just by using a computer, or they were all in presence of the participants?
Sorry, I didn't understand your question.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering, like now with the game community, there is the question, yeah, how do we do games now that there is a pandemic crisis and we cannot bring people together?
Yeah.
Is it possible that as an ABM, it works on a computer? It can work remotely.
So actually, like if you remember like the different approaches or research designs that I showed, like we had this one, the first one where we were combining games and agent-based model. These were mostly on hand, so people were meeting in a group, doing proper workshops, right? I mean, we could still do that if we limit the amount of participants and we keep our distance. But especially the second, like the hybrids of ABM and agent-based model. If you look, for example, if you look into the more recent publications, you'll see that most people use online games. They use some kind of web interface, or they go directly to like the huge, massively, what do they call it, MMO RPGs, like where thousands and hundreds of thousands of people play together and then they build something from that. Yeah, or they conduct their research in there. Yeah.
Nice.
So there is definitely a way forward, especially with digitalization. I actually also have a question for you, which I would like to raise. And maybe somebody could give me some feedback later on. I think because we run out of time, maybe you can just send it to me. I will. You can find my email address in the slide. So my question to everyone is, what would you like to, as a reader, see in our review? So what are you interested in? This is especially when you're from the ABM field. What are your interests? What are your interests when you're more from a gaming sector? Because the overall goal must be that we like encourage more and more cooperation between game research and ABM or social simulation people, right?
Timo, maybe you can write your question in the chat so everybody has it there. Yeah.
Okay.
And then Juan has a question, and then Pedro has a question.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. My question, and I think it also answers a little bit one more what you were asking, is how much do people integrate ethical aspects of mixing like serious games and simulation into policy? Is there any like discussion of ethical considerations or this type of things?
So here's maybe a little bit like a difficulty with our approach, because we were so centered on articles that described an application of games and ABM that was case centered. We were really more interested in the practical side of it. There are indeed papers that write about these concerns, about ethical concerns, and there are more like concepts and methods papers out there these are so far not included in our review if they didn't have a case. Yeah, but there are many of them, and we still have our data set of the 317 papers, I think. So I guess if you would run a different analysis on that, it would be possible to answer such question as well. Yeah, thank you. There was one more question, if I remember.
Yeah, that was me.
Ah, okay.
So, well, thank you very much for the presentation. Interesting, timely, and I look forward to reading the draft or the final publication. It's a bit of an answer to your question, and I posted it on the chat, but I'm going to expand on it a little bit. So this seems to be a new field, a young field. I think of combining simulation with games. I'm personally working on that. I finished the simulation part of my PhD, and I'm moving to the creation of a game. So I'm particularly interested in knowing what is hot on the topic. I would like to know, because we had a meeting with Flaminio yesterday, I don't know if you were there, as the editor of Jazz. So he showed the evolution of the literature with regards to modeling and simulation, and it was interesting, and it looked like we are now at the stage where simulation was 20 years ago, perhaps even more. So I'd like to know how you see journals positioning themselves, if there's one that is sort of more ready to pick up the niche, or where would you advise to publish, what sort of topics for each. That can be a long answer, and probably that could be
there is actually someone who could answer that in our team, but I think he's not present at the moment. We have an overview of that. I don't have it accessible like at this very moment, but I think because a lot of papers that we were including were describing like participatory approaches, you will find most publications in journals that covering like environmental issues.
Right.
Yeah. We can discuss that later on. That's we do have some
room for a
information.
journal. There could be room for a journal on modeling and playing, right?
Definitely. I think it would be super nice. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for your question. So there's one more question. There are several more questions. So because of the time, we have to progress with our workshop now. I'm very interested in your questions, and I'm happy to engage in discussions. What I will do is I will send an email to everyone who registered to this workshop, and then you have my email address, and we can start a discussion. Maybe we even start a discussion room somewhere on an online platform where we could continue. Thank you very much. We now start a little break, and in about 3 minutes, we will start over again. We now start with the second part of our workshop, and I would like to give the word to Melanie.
Thank you very much, Timo. Is it that does everybody have their cameras off?
Yes, we do.
Okay, that's very good. So please don't turn off your computers. Just bear with us, and please, everybody have cameras off. Thank you, Timo. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Melanie Fisk, and I welcome you to the Future Around the World only here at NRK. We'll start with the news that everyone talks about now at the end of 2029. The Nobel Committee has made its decision, and it is a controversial one. The Peace Prize went to Professor Harko Verhagen from Stockholm University for his famous simulation game called Harmony. We are happy to have with us this afternoon Professor Verhagen, but due to the COVID-28 virus second wave, the interview is conducted via video link. Professor Verhagen, are you with us?
Yes, Melanie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you and I can see you very well, Professor Verhagen. Welcome to The Future Around the World, and congratulations. The Peace Nobel Prize is a huge accomplishment. Please say a few words about your famous Harmony game.
Thank you for having me, and I'm very happy, as you can see. So, as you know, the main reason for the prize was already explained by the committee. It has to do with the peaceful encounter last year with the civilization that found the Voyager message that we sent out into the outer space in the 1970s. Given that we already knew the context of their knowledge about us, we had several years to play our game and our interaction testing for the different cultures on Earth. So we could test the strategies in the agent-based simulation to see if we could have a peaceful cooperation. And as you know, the War of the World was prevented by all of this. So I'm thinking it is very well rewarded, yes.
Yes, indeed. How would you answer those who oppose the use of games as a valid research method to understand human behavior?
Yes, well, of course, jealousy is always a role, even in our academic fields. And of course, people, they really think that, well, does this gameplay really help against these and give the extraterrestrials the insight that they need in our reasoning? And also they think agent-based simulation, oh, is that really something good to do? Well, of course, simulation of thought process and behavior in every little detail, that's not possible, and it never was the aim of our research area anyway. However, George Herbert Mead already said a century ago that gameplay is the way to understand others. And of course, we applied this principle on an agent-based model to build a theory of mind in the agents during the simulation and made it the base of the game. And of course, that helps us get around Wittgenstein's language game dilemma that we have to remain silent of what we cannot talk about. So by making things visible, we can talk about them. And we can play the game in a very immersive way, especially with augmented reality. So we're very happy with this.
Yes, I got it.
I'm sorry, Professor, but we have somebody on the line. There's Professor Nanda Burnham from the same university with Professor Verhagen from Stockholm University. She has been a ferocious opponent of Professor Verhagen's nomination to the Peace Nobel Prize. So Professor Nanda, Professor Burnham, can you hear me? Are you with us?
I can hear you. So let me talk about what I have been silent about for far too long. There has been nothing peaceful about a brainwashing Earth's population with your so-called games. Our fraction has been liberating thousands of people from this madness. You all need to know that this is a smokescreen for his actual plan to dominate the world. Albert E. already said that games are the most elevated form of investigation. You bring shame on us all. Where is your honor in being a scientist?
Oh, it seems that we lost Professor Burnham. So Professor Verhagen, what is your game
that's
simulation
no
method good for? So what is your game simulation method good for?
Yes, so as I see it, you know, to give insight in how others see a situation, taking the role of the others in real life-like settings is very important. This enables us to get this Habermasian idea of communicative action in which we can have rational conversations and be friends together. And of course, having a simulation model, explore these areas in the space of simulation where we can have the best options, that really enabled us to make this game very relevant. And we have all seen the results. So the jealousy, I told you already about it. So I'm not surprised by my calling.
Okay, so let's see what else can the audience be interested in. Maybe going back to your research. How do you plan your experiments? Games first, ABM first, or does it really matter?
Well, that really is a chicken-egg question. Is there first the chicken or is there first the egg? In our case, well, we actually built the game first, but it could have been the other way around. I've built ABMs before that as well, so it doesn't really matter in my opinion. It's just a scientific circle anyway.
And what are your plans for further work in this domain? How winning the Nobel Prize will influence your work?
well, of course, I have a lot of money now, so now I'm going to have my own research group, and we're going to export the ideas to the rest of the universe with our newfound friends from Alpha 24. And as we can say, following Star Trek, to go where no simulation model has gone before and play our game and simulations throughout the universe.
Did we get in again? Yes, yes, we got in again. Yes.
What?
Hey, Tinbergen, you cannot fool me. You made my life miserable as a kid, the biggest bully I've ever seen. So I don't understand why you claim to want to study bullying. You are a freaking master of it. I actually cannot believe that they give a Nobel Prize to someone for that. So my team checked on your bullying game experiments, and actually 85% of your participants are now in therapy for post-traumatic stress disorder. And before you, like,
I'm very sorry, Professor Tinberg. I hope that my colleagues from the technical department can secure the video link so such interruptions will be avoided in the future. I want to thank you very much for giving us some insight into your research, and we are all looking forward to hear from you in the near future. Timo, now back from the future, back to the studio.
Thank you very much, Melanie Fisk, if I remember correctly. That was very, very insightful. Thank you for your interview and documentation. We will now start with short interactive sessions where people will be divided into groups by Harko. And I will now post a link in the chat. Please follow that link and you will see there some slides and your group number. And please answer the questions on the slides as a group. So you work together to answer the questions to you. We'll now give the word to Harko.
So everyone should now be in the breakout rooms, and you can start working your way through the questions that we found relevant for our session. breakout activities.
We are back. Thank you very much for organizing this interactive session. That was very fun and was a very nice introduction, and then a good starting point for our group discussion. So we had a very fruitful discussion, but we actually did just cover the first of the 2 slides. Yeah, there was too much going on.
Yes.
Okay, we will not discuss these results now, but we plan to have a follow-up workshop or some kind of event where we can continue the discussion here in the group. You will also receive information on that probably in the email, in the follow-up email I sent out. Okay, we will now start a short break. Again, a few minutes. Let's restrict it to 2 minutes because we're a little bit behind and we have to close this this workshop like a few minutes before, so you have time to actually connect to the next session. So 2 minutes of break and then we start with Christoph. Christoph, do you want to check if your slides now work? Okay, great. So welcome back, everyone. We're gonna now start with our last talk, and I'm very happy to hear Christoph talk about his research because I read almost all of your papers and I really enjoyed. So thank you very much, and it's your turn.
Thank you very much, Timo and Harko. And also I interacted with Melania and Bruce, who invited me to give this presentation. So thank you all for providing me the opportunity to present you some of my work. So I'm supposed to talk about applying games in companion modeling. So I will come back to this combination of role-playing games and agent-based simulation we were actually just working on a few seconds ago. And I will present 2 examples of such a combination. Let me maybe come back to a bit of concern about the terminology. It has already been mentioned by a few of us. It's not an very easy to navigate the field because of some confusion among the different terms used by the ones and the others. Around simulation and gaming, I like very much this definition by Jan Klabers in 2006 in his book Magic Circle. What is a game? You can see here the definition, and for me, almost everything is there. So I really like this definition. Most people now are talking about serious games, so games that are made on purpose for others than entertainment. But this is a very huge definition, and one of the problems is that you can find in this category games that will just involve one participant. If you look back to the definition of Jan Klabers, it's possible to consider games with only one participant. And in our case, in companion modeling, and you will understand why very easily, this is not very interesting. So the serious games that you can play alone are not very interesting. I discovered a very short time ago, actually, that some people are talking about role-play simulation. You have to remember that in companion modeling, we were used to use role-playing games. But I really like this definition of role-play simulation that you can see here on my screen, because there we have very directly the idea that we have a group of people and the collective decision-making is very, very important. So it's very important to stress that we are dealing with a group of people and collective decision-making, which actually it's not very clear when you use role-playing game. The term role-playing game is not so good because, first of all, it has been used for a long, long time by other communities of people. And you don't have clearly this idea that you don't have a specific term to talk about what we are doing on the kind of activity we are promoting. So I pretty much like role-play simulation as a term. Liu already mentioned about these categories of methods proposed by Romina Rodella in a recent paper. I will refer to the same categorization to position a companion modeling. In companion modeling, we will consider both games for research and games as intervention at the same time. And coming back to what we have written in our, let's say, kind of position paper published in JAS back in 2003, if you look at the back of the text, you will find again this idea that role-play simulation or role-playing games and agent-based simulation can be very useful to consider these two objectives, not necessarily both at the same time, but they are interrelated. So each time we will engage in a companion modeling process, we will have this in mind. It's very important to understand the nature of a companion modeling approach. So I also provided in that slide some information that we published a collective book in Springer in 2014, an English version. It was originally published in French in 2010. And we also have a website. You can see the URL at the top of my slide. This kind of, let's say, participatory modeling approach is a specific category within the huge collection of approaches you can find in people using models with stakeholders. So here I'm referring to a very nice paper I recommend to you by Anne van Bruggen and her colleagues, published last year, where she proposed to have these 4 categories of modeling with stakeholders kind of approaches. I'm not going to details everything here, but just to tell you that companion modeling is one of the methods that belongs to transformative modeling. You can understand why if you look at the definitions they propose for this category. We can very clearly relate to what was on my previous slide. Companion modeling is not the only one. I think there are 3 others modeling approaches that also belong to this transformative modeling. One of them is group model building. Probably most of you know people using system dynamics with this kind of objectives and this way to see the roles of participation in this kind of approaches. So to us, what will be very important is the possibility or the ability to stimulate a collective learning among the participants. And actually, role-play simulation or role-playing game session, it's very easy to see that it's a kind of experiential learning. And it's very important to stress the collective level and the interactions among the participants is very, very important. So these both aspects of learning is quite important. They will maybe combine in what we can call social learning, but the experiential dimension is also very important. So here I have some points to consider that will characterize the kind of companion modeling approach. First, but as it's true for all the games, a step away from reality. And I'll come back on that. The distance to reality is quite important and related to this idea of having a specific objective of stimulating social learning. The distance has to be not important, but quite present. It does not have to be too realistic. Then also in our approach, the design of the game or of the simulation model is a collaborative process. And so it's a co-design. It's not only using games with people, it's also designing games with people themselves. And we are going to apply stylized representation, not so realistic. And will also will allow to simulate action situations. So it's quite open experiment during the gaming sessions. It's quite important to us that participants can interact as they wish while remaining within the general framework. So we have to balance there is some rules set by the game designers that cannot be broken, but otherwise any suggestions, we can just welcome them, and we can just sometimes adjust on the fly, including new rules or new roles during one session if the session is interesting for that, because it can be a way to actually co-design the game. I'll come back on that later. So one point on this distance to reality and the fact that we promote stylized representation. So it has to do with levels of abstraction in the representation of space most of the time, because we are working on social ecological systems. We can have what we can call abstract, purely abstract representation, with the darkness of the green is related to the abundance of the biomass of one renewable resources in this game, which is pictures of a game called Rehab. On the other end of the possible, all the possibilities, you can find realistic representations. This is here a snapshot of Chesapeake Watershed, a game that has been designed in the US, and where the participants of the gaming session have to make decisions about the multiple activities in this watershed. And so they provide very realistic information about this particular watershed. And what I call a stylized representation here is taken from a game designed by Michel Etienne, and it is representing a Mediterranean forest with 3 basic colors, coding for grass level in yellow, a shrub level in red, and a tree level in blue. And to account for the fact that at some particular place you can have both grass and shrub, you will mix yellow and red to get this orange color to represent a situation, a place with this combination of vegetation layers. What is related to a Mediterranean forest here is not a particular forest. It's only the proportion of the different combination of the vegetation layers. This is typical from a Mediterranean forest. So by this idea of similar proportions, you just bring something that make the relation to the reality, but still it's very stylized. It's not very realistic. You have to jump into this representation of color coding to represent in your mind that this is a forest, and as a forester, you would decide to do some activities. As a shepherd, you would decide according to other characteristics of this stylized space. And actually, we have a kind of hypothesis that this kind of stylized representation is best suited to stimulate social learning with a diversity of stakeholders, and including local actors. This is particularly important for me with working in CIRAD. Actually, I'm working in developing countries in Africa and in Southeast Asia, in South America, and sometimes with poor people, poor farmers. And when you have to interact with both this kind of actors with little literacy, with people, policymakers, it can be very tricky to accommodate all these kind of stakeholders in the same session. So we proposed an acronym like a KILT approach, referring to the KISS and KIDS approaches that are well known in the community of modelers. So KILT is just to emphasize that the main objective is to promote social learning. So we have to keep the model as a learning tool, keep it a learning tool. And the strategy is to use role-play simulation from an early stage of the process, of the participatory modeling process, because it can be a strategy to facilitate the co-design, and especially to involve these local actors. Because this kind of tool, there is no problem to come with a game and to play a game with local actors. They will enter without any difficulties into it. It can be more tricky if you come with a methodology like you will design a graph, a conceptual model with local actors. It sometimes does not work that much. So the idea is to initiate the process with an oversimplified, stylized, yet empirically grounded model. It's really not finished, not polished. It's really a sketch. And so it remains an important work of progressive shaping and improvement. And people understand very well that they know very well the system we'd like to represent in a stylized way. So we need them to make something meaningful. And so maybe it's kind of trick to involve the people in the co-design. I would like to show you quickly 2 examples just to illustrate this methodology. The first one is taken from a PhD performed by Arthur Perroton, who worked in Zimbabwe. And the topic was a coexistence between farmers and wildlife at the edge of a protected area. I have no time to go into the details of the model, but what you see here is a kind of stylized representation of this periphery. On the left side here, these are the plots with the farms of people. We can see the small animals, actually they are cows. And the orange blocks here are farms. And on the right-hand side here, we have a forest, a community forest with water points inside. And at some point of the year, the local people, they don't have any grass to feed their cattle. They have no way but to enter the forest to feed their cattle during the dry season in particular. So we designed this game. We have also the time step is the week. So here you have information about the climate every week, and this is a way to schedule the game. So obviously we don't have one game round for each week. We just provide the result of 1 month by showing what was the weather for the 4 weeks. And we go month by month with the decision of the participants. So at the beginning of the process, we started with only the farmers. And we involved a group of 10 farmers in the co-design of the model I just showed you. And the objective was to better understand cattle herding strategies at the edge of a protected area. So the focus was really on what is your strategy as a farmer? So they can decide for the strategy for the cattle and also for the type of crops they are growing. What you see in these pictures is a kind of setting we are using now, where we used a projector, a special projector, to have a kind of computerized board game on which the participants can locate, manipulate elements of a game. So it's combining what is good of having a board game, because people can manipulate directly the elements of the game, with the refresh and all the calculation that are needed when you work with a space where you have some natural processes that you have to just to update every time step. And the people facilitating this session is one of the 10 farmers who belongs to this group of co-designers. So it was also a kind of strategy for us to have these people comfortable enough to be in a position of facilitating gaming sessions with other people who did not participate in the co-design. So we had a set of these kind of sessions during the first stage of the process. And then, but later on, maybe one year and a half later, we just modified a little bit the game to include players endorsing the role of protected area managers. And there we have also the idea not only to play on the timing of the process with a stage with only one kind of stakeholders, and after a while, you just invite the other stakeholders to join, but also in the spatial setting of a gaming session, you can provide space for one kind of players. Here are the farmers. They will be around the computerized board game to discuss about their strategy as farmers. And somewhere else, outside the room, separated from them, you'll have the other type of stakeholders, the participants will play the protected area managers with very specific information about their activities, only available to them and not to the other kind of stakeholders. So by having these kind of settings, we can have specific information displayed to a specific type of players. And as organizers of the game session, we are going to observe if at some stage one participant will take the initiative to go and to talk with the other participants. So we have a lot of things to observe during these gaming sessions to see how people will do something spontaneously or not. We observe this. It's not part of the rules given to the players. They are free to interact with the other players, or they are free to stay by their own and to continue their activity without negotiating with the other ones. So if it happens, then the observer of the gaming session will take note of that and will take verbatim of what they will say, justifications for decision and so on. And here you have just two pictures to illustrate this. This is the place for the farmers to play all together, so they can also coordinate themselves or not at that level of the farmers in the village. And outside the room, we had the two players being the protected area managers with a laptop in front of them, specific information. And here what you see is that the farmers were the one to decide to go and to talk to the protected area managers. Some stage in this particular session, it happened. Okay, another example is in Thailand. I'm not going to go into the details of the case study. This is also a story of coexistence between farmers and a national park. And here we had three types of farmers, depending on the way they are doing activities and how they rely to non-timber-forest products. So the type A are the poor farmers, and type C are the more comfortable farmers, let's say, to go very quick. And you see again an example of a stylized representation of this social ecological system. Here, it's organized by column. Along one column, on the lower part, you have some plots. So the red color is for type A farm. The orange color is for type B farm. The blue color are the plots of type C farmers. So we have a number of farmers with plots, and they have to decide what they grow, which kind of crops they grow on their crop, on their plot. And the upper part of the game board is a forest with some non-timber forest products. So it's just to show you how it looks like, this game board. And here you have some pictures about some role-playing game sessions based on a board game with people interacting. At some stage later on, we introduced an agent-based simulation that you can see, I hope, the similarities are very strong. We took exactly the same grid size, the same color coding to represent the crops of the three types of farmers and the non-timber forest product in the upper part of the landscape. So it's really exactly the same representation of the game board. But now it's computerized, and it means this is an example of hybrid agent-based simulation. We can play this software by having all the farmers played automatically, and then we can use the tool exactly as an agent-based simulation tool to explore and to discuss results of scenarios in 10 years. And the time horizon is 10 years. Or we can also use it as a hybrid simulation tool where just to explain the tool, you say, okay, player A2, someone in the room will play it. And all the other players, they will be played by the computer. So you have the choice to do a demonstration of the simulation tool like that, in a hybrid form.
Sorry, I have to interrupt you a little bit. It might be possible that our session closes at 4 immediately. I'm not sure how the channel is organized in that way, just to let you know that maybe we get kicked out. So we will see.
I try to finish. I'm almost finished.
Okay.
The next slide was just an overview of the whole process, where you can see that we used at different times different versions of the tools. And the idea is to adjust the tool we used at the different stages of the process according to the specific need of the stage. And so we had a set of similar models that were used during that process. This is my last slide, actually. I just wanted to conclude by, but all of you, it's obvious to note that role-playing game simulations are kind of social simulations. So the observation of the game is very useful for us as game organizers to get insights about what is influencing these decisions. On these pictures, you see a guy behind taking notes, observing what is happening, and also a device to record the voices of the participants. And in the component modeling network, we have this sense of having people observing a role-playing game sessions, being rather playing as player, the game, or being very explicitly presented as being part of the role-playing game sessions, participating observer. It means everybody knows that someone is observing them and that we will discuss and debrief what this guy will observe during the debriefing. That's it. Thank you for your attention. I have here all the references that I mentioned in my talk.
Thank you very much for your talk. I think we continue with questions as long as we have the possibility to use this room. But I must remind you that there is a parallel session going on now. So if you want to attend that, you might have to leave now. Also, because of time issues, please write down your questions in the chat if we cannot cover them. So I will save them and send them to Christoph. Okay, we are open for questions.
I have a question for Christoph. Is that fine, Timo?
Yes, please go ahead.
I was wondering, Christoph, with the colleagues that you are working, what is their background? Are they trained computer scientists or social scientists, or what is their background?
Yeah, in my research unit, we have different backgrounds. I am working with social scientists. I'm working with agronomists. I'm working with people from economics, computer scientists as well. So in my research unit, we have this chance to have people from different backgrounds. And usually, when you go for such a process, you have a team of designers, let's say, and we always have different backgrounds within the team.
And game designers or game researchers, are they part of your team?
It happens that we can collaborate with game designers, professional game designers, but most of the case it's when the game show a potential for. I did not mention anything about using the games to train or to teach, but actually some of the games designed for research or intervention can be used for education as well. But there you need really to adjust a little bit the game, and this is when, before to transfer the game, we can interact with game designers.
Thank you.
Okay, there are some more questions. There's one more question in the chat. So how do you address longer time scales in the ABM compared to games, more rounds, for example, I think?
Yeah, actually, what you call a round in a role-playing